Too many restaurants are just focused on getting butts and seats, not thinking about building revenue and building their bottom line from increasing check average.
The challenge is, how do you get more butts and seats, right? That's really, in many cases, it's somewhat out of the control of the restaurant. So I think the key to that is looking at your situation and maximizing where you're at, right? Live within your backyard. So if you're a, let's say, for example, your business is weekend business and you're super busy on the weekends, you can't add any more guests in the weekends. Your reservations are maxed. You've coordinated the tables. You're doing 2.5 turns. You're busy, but on the weekdays you're slow. So you've got to think through, okay, that's my situation. Until I can build my business up, the reality is all of my business is coming in on Friday and Saturday. I've got to maximize that revenue coming in on Friday and Saturday. So right. I better capture every guest that I can, every opportunity with those guests that I can. Same thing for seasonal restaurants. We see this a lot, right? In the summertime, business can go up 40%, and then in some cases it just in the wintertime comes and it's dead. They have to make all their money in the season.
Right.
So they better be really smart about capturing as much as they can, from all the guests coming in, and making smart menu decisions and smart staffing decisions to help the servers maximize what the guests are willing to spend.
So we talked a little bit about server incentives, right? What are some other things that you can do to make sure that these items that you put on your menu are actually landing on the table and building check average?
Yeah, so there's a few things. There can be some appeal to those. Let's say you're creating a beverage and it's something that you just want to kind of goose your check average. Make it a limited time offering, right? Create some FOMO behind it. That in itself is a good server incentive for somebody that's hey, this is only here for, it's truffle season right now, so we're going to do an add-on for truffles, but it's only happening for this 2 weeks. Right. That will drive that. That's a strategy to drive that. How it's laid out on the menu. Are you using the menu in a smart way? So are you highlighting those items? Or are they buried somewhere in the bottom? Are you putting a box around it? Are you putting it at the top right where the eyes tend to go when people are looking at menus, right? Either the top left or the top right is the first thing that people look at. So what the layout's important. Make it easier on your staff to sell this item, and they'll sell it.
You mentioned something earlier about bundling. Can you explain what you're talking about?
Sure. So value is really important nowadays, right? People are talking about wanting to get more value, and value is really an individual perception. So if I'm going into a restaurant, I understand what I'm willing to spend and I want to, and the experience that I want to do or get. So if they're struggling with, let's say, beverage sales, and I was just talking to a client about this yesterday, as a matter of fact, where for some reason they were just banging their heads on the door going, how do we get more beer and wine sales from our guests? They're doing great on food, but they just can't seem to get this in this particular environment. So we started talking about, well, how do you put together a menu that creates value perception for a guest? It seems to be a good value, but in essence, what you're doing is you're getting extra money from the guest by putting items together. So let's say you're a pizza concept. Well, what if you were to put together a pizza and a beer bundle, or an appetizer and an entree? Put it together. Make it seem like, hey, this is great. It really takes the pressure off a guest to make decisions, right? So it makes their experience better, gives them good value, makes it easier on the staff to do it, and basically you're getting additional revenue from that one order, where the guests feel like instead of just getting they're still in their mind they're buying an entree. In actuality, they're buying an entree and maybe a beverage and maybe something additional to go with that. Make it easy on the guests, and they'll be willing to spend.
Awesome. Yeah, just going through your presentation here. So you talked a little bit about margin impact. Can you dig in a little bit on that?
Yeah, 100%. This is really the crux of why check average is so important, right? So every year, what happens? Labor cost goes up. Minimum wage goes up. In many markets, energy costs are going up. We all know the cost of food is going up. So everything's going up and up and up. What's not going up is people's spend. So those margins get eroded. So the amount that it's costing you to make the same dish this year is more expensive than last year. almost across the board.
Right.
So getting that same amount of money from that dish, and you can't raise your prices to a point where you're going to turn off guests and they're going to stop coming with the same frequency. So it's a real tightrope in terms of pricing, and that's the other strategy that restaurants jump into is I've got to raise prices.
Right.
That's a dangerous slippery slope because you're going to price yourself out of additional guest visits, which is again you've got the problem of you've got the butts and seats issue.
Right.
So so looking at that, how do you get more revenue from those guests with the same labor that you've got without having to add more labor or add more, more facilities expenses or more marketing expenses? So a simple $4, $8 add to a check doesn't cost you a penny more in labor, doesn't cost you anything else to get those, and it helps mitigate those, which in many cases labor has almost become a fixed cost for restaurants because the cost of labor is so high that they can only, they have to staff at a certain level to execute.
Yeah.
So they really need to be thinking about how they can help those reduced margins that they're facing with all those increasing costs. And that's the way they have to do it, because if they're not going to get more people in the door, they have to maximize what's there.
Nice. So look, what I'm hearing is too many restaurants are just focused on getting butts and seats, not thinking about building revenue and building their bottom line from increasing check average. Increasing check average is not just about increasing the price of your existing menus. It's
right.
about better training, getting more stuff on the table, providing value, bundling items, upselling. There's a lot of different tactics to build check average, and
yeah, I want to really tag off a point that you just made, Alex, and that's and it goes back to just what I was saying about the first reaction is increasing menu prices. So check average, focusing on check average is really, that's what you're doing, is you're able to increase your menu prices without increasing your menu prices. If you know what I mean? So you can getting more money out of the guests without having to, without increasing your prices and potentially scaring them away from coming to your restaurant. That's a critical thing nowadays. It's absolutely essential, and it's smart business. You can do it. So you still have that value perception that your guests are used to when they're coming in, but realizing that they feel good about the fact that, instead of spending $50, I spent $60, and I feel good about it because the value was there and I had a great experience, and I don't feel like they were just hitting me with more expensive menu items.
Totally. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been super helpful. It was a great presentation to the team. Glad that our staff can walk away and take some of this back to their clients. So appreciate you doing that, putting this together.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Alex.